Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Bordertown Strange. I'm Pam, and this is my co-host, Jess. And
Hello.
tonight, our show is about the Hatman Enigma. And I want to welcome all of our new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first-timers in the chat. And if you're not joining us live, but you're listening on replay, thank you, and welcome to you as well. So, yay!
Yay!
How funny. So
All right.
tonight is the Hatman phenomenon, and this
Yes.
subject, it's chilling and it's fascinating, and there's like countless reports around the world. So we're super excited to bring this one to you guys. Do you want to start some housekeeping and I'll pull up the
I
info?
do.
Yeah.
All right. So, of course, as always, a huge thank you to our subscribers and followers and anyone new that's come to us. We are so thankful for you. Um, if you could just take a second, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a little thumbs up and or a like and a share. And if you're on YouTube watching live right now, give us a thumbs up and hit that bell so you can know when we go live. And as always, if you want to listen to us later, we're available on wherever you get your podcasts. So you can listen in while you're in your car to all of our silly gibbering.
It's all our jibber jabber.
That's right. Make sure you stay clear to the end to play a few rounds of the notebook game, of course. And we also want to say a big ol' happy birthday to our favorite medium, Miss Christy Campbell.
Yes, happy birthday, Christy.
Yes, and we have good news about Christy. She's going to be back for Paracon this year, and she's going to be doing a full room reading again. So you, for free, can come and take part of all Christy has to offer. And then, of course, afterwards, she'll be doing her regular services on healing and regular medium readings. Those are pay for, of course, so she can afford to come and hang out with us. But you can
Woohoo!
come and do the open floor reading for free. So much fun. Yeah.
Awesome
We also
sauce.
wanted to say, before we head off here, next the next show, which will be the 21st, I believe, May 21st, we're going to be doing it on the app Randonautica. We've already started the process of doing some research by using the app. If you don't know what that is, Randonautica is an app that uses kind of a weird, I don't even know what to say about it. It uses a system of numbers and locations. You put a thought into the app, like I want to see something pretty or I want to see something red. You put your thought form kind of into it and it pulls up a map, and it supposedly is supposed to lead you to whatever it is you're asking for. It's like a fun day tripper type of game. Um, but in my opinion, it really kind of works. Just this last weekend, Pam and I and Mark went on a little Randonautica trip, and I think we did four rounds of it, and three of those four I think worked out really well.
They did
Yeah, it was super
really
kind of,
well.
yeah, really weird, kind of creepy sometimes. But what we're asking for is, if you're one of our regular listeners or if you want to pop in on the next one, go ahead and download Randonautica and give it a try yourself and let us know how it goes. Because the more
Send
info
us
we
your
get coming in,
stories.
yeah,
Absolutely. We want firsthand accounts of people that we know or know of. So that would be super
yeah.
exciting. So I'm going
Uh,
to go through here. We got a bunch of people in the chat saying, hey, there's Chris. Hi,
hey,
Chris. And Ginger. Hi, Ginger. And there's Enzo. Yay. And Ian. Hi, Ian. And yay, Chelsea made it to the live. Woohoo. We're glad you're here.
yay!
Let's see here. And yes, paranormal geocaching. That's a really good way to look
Exactly.
at it.
Yeah. Um, Fair warning though, some very strange and some very kind of gross things have come out of this too. A number of years back, a group of kids went out on it looking for, I can't remember what their prompt was. It was like something strange or gross or terrible or something like that, and they ended up at a beach at a suitcase that had a body in it of a woman who'd been missing for like a month.
What are the
So,
odds? That is freaky. But
yeah.
yeah, that's, I
So,
mean, when you pull it up, you're supposed to, type your intention in. Am I correct? And then
yeah.
focus on that.
Yeah.
with your mind. Just focus as you type it in to kind of give it a little bit of oomph, I guess. But it seemed to really, I was shocked. Out of 4 rounds, 3 of them were
Yeah.
matched. So,
Yeah. And we're
and
still a little unsure on the fourth one. I'm
yeah,
looking into it, but
yeah.
anywho, yeah. But we would love for you all to try that out and let us know how it turns out. Take a photo of where you
Hmm.
end up at or whatever you end up at, you know, if it's a particular object or whatever.
Make a note of what your
Yeah.
intention was and then take the photo when you find it. So we can't wait to share them. I'd like to share them now, but that'd ruin our show coming up. So we will. There you go. Chelsea said
Chelsea.
maybe my hubby and I can have a date day of randonautica-ing. Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
fun.
it is. You can make your space real small or real large, however you can go pretty far out if you want. My daughter and I have done it before, and we just do a little walk around our area that's within walking distance. When Pam and Mark and I went out, we went on a drive, so we went out a little bit further. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's super fun.
So cool.
Yeah. All right. So we were talking about. Did you want to pull up anything on the Paracon or anything, or you want to leave that till the end?
Let's leave that till the end.
Okay. So, what the weird word of the week?
What the weird word. And since we were going with the Hatman show tonight, I thought it'd be a perfect time to have the what the weird word be shadow person. And so, what a
Yeah.
shadow person is, it's a dark, often humanoid figures that appear to be silhouettes or shadows. They can resemble humans or other creatures, and some reports even describe them with odd features like reptilian eyes or unusual height or red eyes. We hear that a lot too. Um, and a figure in urban legend, the Hat Man is often associated with shadow people, being described as a tall, dark robed figure with a hat, sometimes seen as manifestation of the devil. Yeah, a lot of the stories that I know I ran across, I'm sure Jess did too, because there was too many of them, felt that it was evil, whatever it was. But there's just as many that said that it wasn't. Um, and that it also says auditory and physical manifestations. So interesting.
Yeah.
But that's our what the weird word. Woohoo. We're gonna have to make a
Yay.
sound effect to go along with that.
We do. We need to employ Enzo on finding us a good like
Yes.
ditty or something to go
What I
with.
need to do is just take the time to mess with my soundboard because
Or
I
we could just make
find
Enzo do it.
we could just make Enzo do it. No, no, we could ask Enzo to kindly assist us with that. Jess is like, no, I'll just make him.
We'll just blackmail him into it. I know he's listening. Haha, I'm just
He
joking.
is. Oh, that would be perfect. The more you know. Do 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 do.
All right.
Would be
So,
perfect.
Hatman, where do we start? We should probably start with what it is and its attributes, maybe?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. I lost my
I was
screen. Where's my
surprised how many
screen?
people don't know what Hatman is. I kept running onto that, like in my research. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'd never heard of Hatman. Um, which
It
actually kind of lends a little bit to the stories because a lot of the stories I found were like, I had this dream or I saw this thing, and then I went to go look it up and didn't realize it was a thing. So,
I saw a lot of that too.
yeah. So let's see here. Okay, so the phenomenon of the Hat Man, it's almost always tall, shadowy, sometimes solid, sometimes kind of see through.
Mhm.
Usually has a wide brimmed hat or a bowler hat or a top hat, some sort of a hat. I even found a couple of them that had like sombreros.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
Well, they're a
exciting.
global phenomena. They're not just here in the United States, and that's what's really interesting about them is because you see them, all over the world, and they would. I mean, it makes sense if you would see one in an era where sombreros were worn, that you would see a hat man with one as well.
Yeah, true. Um, they also usually have like a trench coat, a pea coat, or like a cape type of situation.
Hmm.
I also found a lot of them where they had some kind of a weird wrapping on their arms beyond just the coats, which is never explained in any of them. Nothing happens with these wrappings, but
Hmm.
they see these there.
They're just
Um,
noted.
yeah. So they also have extraordinarily long arms. A lot of times they talk about very long fingers. So uh, you're talking almost like Slender Manny type
Mhm.
of looking. In fact, I have one story where the girl kind of said he looked almost like Jack Skellington in shape
Yes.
from Nightmare Before Christmas. Um, they never see the face or not in its entirety. Sometimes you can see like their lower face, but you never really see up above here, except for occasionally like glowing eyes, and
Mhm.
they change colors. They can be red, blue, green. Um, I think I saw a yellow one with yellow
Yeah,
eyes.
yellow lizardy eyes is what I saw,
Yeah,
the reptilian colored eyes.
yeah. Um, they're seen a lot with mists and smoke and stuff. Oddly enough, which kind
Hmm.
of leans towards UFO alien type things, which is very, very strange.
That is.
Um, they're almost always completely silent. I did find a few where they spoke or made a noise, but almost always they're just kind of lurking off in a shadowy corner or leaning over you, making no noise whatsoever.
Chelsea said,
Um,
not gonna lie, a Batman mariachi band would be almost as entertaining as it would be frightening. Oh, it's the Hat Man. She
so,
corrected it. I said it like you said it. That's funny. I don't know. Batman would be pretty cool too.
strange kind of fever dream.
And Enzo said like invisible band slash mummy wrappings on the arms.
Yeah, they a lot of them I found they talked about they looked like mummy wrappings or like they had taken like a really thin white scarf and just wrapped it from like
Interesting.
the elbows down.
I didn't run across those.
Very
That's pretty
strange.
cool.
Yeah.
Enzo said the Three Amigos.
Oh Lord, it has begun.
It
Bring it
has
on, boys.
begun.
um they're also they're they're seen almost exclusively by themselves, but there are several occasions where they're seen with like a whole grouping of just regular shadow people without the hats.
Mhm.
Like they've got a little gang that travels with them.
Entourage.
Yeah. Super weird. And like Pam said earlier, they're seen in so many different cultures all over
Mhm.
the world. And from extraordinarily far back, I was telling Pam, I found stories back from like the 1800s.
Which is interesting. And it makes you wonder too, eh, we've talked about this before on different shows where the idea may be there, but you just don't have the words to, or the
Mm-hmm.
image to name it. And so, if you don't know what it is, you're not going to know to call it a hat man if it's in the 1800s or whenever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there could be a
Yeah.
lot of them that they were just misnamed or who
Yeah.
knows.
Well, speaking of that, I don't know. I'm sure this is probably true for you too, Pam, but when I was researching these stories, I Hatman was where I started at, but then I started changing how I logged in. So it was like Shadow Man or
Yes.
Dark Man glowing eyes, and I would
Mhm.
just sit there and plug different things in and then go through like 20 pages on the internet
Yep.
finding these little prompts. And
Nightmare
that's how I
entity
found them.
is one that I did.
Yeah, nightmare, sleep paralysis, man. Because
Yes.
we should get into that. Like,
Hmm.
a lot of the times they actually, if like the first 3 pages of the internet are all about how it's sleep paralysis and that it's people having silly fever dreams
Oh yeah,
and it's
that's
not
huge.
real. It's blah 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 blah. Um, and it does happen a lot during sleep paralysis, but I think there's probably a very good theory about that. I would say that it either happens during sleep paralysis because it's the easiest time for that thing to slip through,
Hmm.
or it's causing the sleep paralysis so that it can kind of enter into your headspace.
Yeah, and I mean, we see a lot of stories about the hag sitting on the chest, during sleep paralysis, or different things looking at you during
Yeah.
sleep paralysis, and you just can't move. And I did run across quite a few stories that involve the Hat Man, where they would see it standing in the door or looming over them, and they're in the middle of sleep paralysis, and they can't do anything about it. All they can do
Yeah.
is look back, and that would
Do
be
you want to
terrifying.
do you want to tell everybody what sleep paralysis is in case they don't know quite what that is?
So, sleep paralysis is basically when you enter into deep REM sleep. Sometimes what your body does, it's a natural thing. It, it's the body's mechanism to keep you from getting up and wandering around in your sleep while you're dreaming, basically. So it's a normal thing, but in a case like this, you should be able to come right out of it as soon as you wake up. But sleep paralysis itself, the way that it's named, um, it means where there's a misfire basically in your brain where when you wake up your body still thinks it's you should be asleep, so it's not allowing you to get up and walk around.
Yeah.
So that's the scientific part of it, but then you've got cases where you wake up or are awoken by these creatures or beings or entities or whatever they are, and it's sometimes feels like they are the cause of your body not allowing you to move. So it's a theory that they are causing you, basically pinning you down some way that we
Mm-hmm.
don't know what the way is. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Very much like a succubus or something like that.
Incubus, yeah.
Yeah. However, I will say, so like if you look at it scientifically, they accuse it of this like hypnagogic, hallucinations that happen
Mhm.
while you're under your body's sleep paralysis. But if you go and you look up these stories, I would guess that this happens only about 30-ish% of the time. The
Mhm.
rest of them is when people are wide awake during all times of the day and night.
Yes. And I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. And that really throws out the entire, they're a figment of sleep paralysis kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we just found some pictures that we'll show here in a little bit too, that are pretty disturbing. And it's broad daylight.
Yeah. So there's some crazy stuff.
Hmm.
It's also been blamed on, of course, drug usage, but that's an easy out, used for just about
Yeah.
everything. You'll also find stories where he's called the Benadryl Man.
Yes, I saw those.
Um, there's some of these
Benadryl
scientists that says,
overdose.
oh, there's something in Benadryl that affects some people, and so they'll see this, which still doesn't explain while everybody is having the exact same hallucination underneath the Benadryl.
Yes,
I would think that the Benadryl is causing something like the sleep paralysis, allowing whatever this thing is to slip in easily, would be my
yes.
guess.
Mine too. I think it's more of an idea of you're in a liminal space when you're asleep, and when you're half asleep,
Mm-hmm.
half awake, you're definitely in a liminal space, and you're more open and
Yeah,
available for these things to contact you or to come through to you or whatever, have some effect on you. So yeah.
yeah. You're in like that weird twilight area where
Hmm.
I think just about anything can make itself known if it wanted to.
And we were talking about the nightmare thing in Germany. There's some that link it to and I'm gonna massacre this. So yay, Ian. Um, Nachtmar, Nachtmar, or a nightmare spirit. So even in different cultures, it's linked as the nightmare spirit too. That's just one of them that I pulled. There's others too, but I thought it's really fascinating that again, it's global, and it's the same reports of the same thing that's
Yeah,
being seen.
yeah. Um, yeah, and like, it's been reported worldwide, even though they're dismissing it as this like learned mass hallucination. Which it makes no sense.
No.
Another interesting one is that like there's people that have multiple experiences with the same Hatman over and over again in different aspects. Like they'll have one while they're under, sleep paralysis, and then they'll see him the next day when they're at like school. And
Yeah.
then a couple weeks will pass and they'll see him again. It'll be the exact same one, dressed exactly the same way, almost interacting with them sometimes. So
Mhm.
that makes no sense either. Um, I also found a study that they did that showed a high percentage of the experiencers were either empathetic, they were sensitives, mediums,
Mhm.
or a experiencer of some sort, or they were a product of trauma or illness. So yet again, I think that just shows that they're hanging out there somewhere in that twilight area. And I think those types of people are just very easily in that position to see them.
Ian said, I'm not German. Feel free to massacre their language. Yay, because we will. That's hilarious.
Absolutely.
And Enzo said, I hadn't heard about the Benadryl connection to poor man's DMT elves experiment. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, I was reading one story they were talking about sometime back in like the mid 90s or something like that. There were groups of kids taking Benadryl on purpose
Yeah.
to get that high, and they were hauling them to the hospital. Of course, the parents would take them to the hospital to get them down off of it, and they were claiming that they were being attacked by the Hat Man.
Yep.
So, like I said, I think the Benadryl didn't cause it. I think the Benadryl gave the thing the opportunity to slip in.
The doorway. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I also saw ideas that, like scientifically, that Hat Man could be a product of the brain's attempt to make sense of ambiguous stimuli, like
Mm-hmm.
shadows or noises. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure some of it may be, but there's too many specific situations, specific sightings that make me not think that it's all just, oh, lump it under the scientific explanation that they're giving
Yeah.
us and call it a day. I think there's more to it than that, because I wish Mark could have been here tonight. He could talk about, and Mike, in our group, both of them have seen shadow figures on different
Mm-hmm.
investigations that we've done. And that's always interesting.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So, like we were talking about earlier, these go way back. This isn't a new phenomenon, although they seem to kind of develop and change over the years just a little bit. Like Pam was talking about the kind of the German version of this. There's also the Slavic domovoi, I think it's called domovoi or something like that.
Mhm.
The succubus, which we already talked about. The old hags, English style. You've got the Dark Watchers,
Which I
Hawaiian.
will find a copy of that book one of these days. I've been on this earth.
Another, yeah, another interesting one I found. I told Pam about this when we were backstage. I actually found an American Indian version, which I'd actually never heard of. Shocker, Miss Queen of looking up Indian lore here. I found one called Walking Sam that's quite prevalent in the southwestern Indian tribes here in North America. Um, so they're tied in loosely with some another. Okay, so like the shadow people, not the Hat Man, the shadow people we were talking about, their version of that is called Stick Indians. That's what they call them. And he is like their king, basically. Which makes sense because we
It
were talking
does.
about these situations where people are seeing the Hat Man surrounded by all of these, non hatted shadow
Yeah.
people. So, um, these Stick Indians and Walking Sam, they attempt to lure people to their doom, and they're known for their whistling. They have the ability to paralyze you, hypnotize you, or drive you to your death. An ominous cloud follows them, and wherever they are stalking, and they also have a fog that happens with them too. Walking Sam is believed to be the strongest and the most evil one. He has a tall black hat, is extraordinarily tall, thin, and has long arms and fingers and no facial features.
Yep.
This is it. He's often seen with the bodies of native men, women, and children draped or carried over his long arms. They are his collected victims that he carries wherever he goes. That's the only difference, although I found it quite striking. The drawings of him with the bodies draped over him, the bodies aren't like full size, they're little, and they kind of mimic those wraps that I was talking about earlier on the
Hmm.
arms. So I'm wondering if that's maybe where the tie-in is
Maybe.
at.
I
Yeah.
know, it's interesting that you're talking about that they show up with the fog, because that makes me think of Jenny Randall's book, Time Storms, because
Yes.
during time storms where people slip in and out of basically a portal, I don't know what else you would call it, um, there's fog involved. There's
Yeah.
the dense fog. There's clouds that they go into and out of. So, that kind of, we'll talk about this theory later too, that they may be just interdimensional beings too.
Yeah.
I'm going to back up here a little bit. We got some stuff going on in the chat. Enzo said,
Okay.
Ken and I briefly saw a shadow person at the McIntyre. And yes, I had forgotten about that, Enzo. Yeah, they sure did.
Wow.
He had a stellar night at the McIntyre for sure.
He did.
Ian said, I wonder if Freddy Krueger and his notable hat was inspired by the Hat Man. There's a definite themes that correspond. That's true.
Actually, oddly enough, Ian brings this up. This is a good thing to bring up. I found on many occasions these scientists who claim that it's all, hypnagogic hallucinations and stuff, they actually blame it on Freddy Krueger. They claim that nobody said there was a Hat Man until after that movie was out,
Yeah.
and that it was just our way of, attributing, you know,
Interpreting the
interpreting one thing to the other. It became, all the scene, everybody was all about Freddy Krueger and stuff, so that must have been what influenced these hallucinations. Absolutely ridiculous.
crazy. And Chelsea said, I've heard of the Dark Watchers too. I wonder where they fit into native stories and more. They do fit into it. I can't remember which valley is it that they watch over, that they're seeing the most in. It's in California.
Oh
Um,
Lord. I've got it somewhere. I just
yeah, I
can't
do
think of it
too.
off the top of my
But
head.
there's a book somewhere that I cannot get my hands on yet, but I am it's my goal. It's been one of those books I've been looking for about 4 or 5 years now. And it's called Dark Watchers, and it's by a very famous person. I can't even remember their name now. Um, that wrote it. I want to say he was was he a famous painter? Maybe.
Yes.
Can't remember his
And
name.
and like
But
his son kept up the research on it or something
yes,
like that.
after he passed, he did. So,
I've
but
got it
it's
somewhere. I don't know where it is.
fascinating stuff. Yeah, I do too. I have it filed somewhere, and it's in my brain somewhere. But yeah, no, there's too many tabs open in there. Never find anything. So you're talking. Are you done on? Do you have any more on the Native American lore
No, I
that
just
you
have
wanted to
that
touch on?
one.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's
Before we went
probably
on, I wanted
more,
to.
but
So I ran across some stuff about the Babadook, and it being,
okay.
it's a supernatural creature that haunts its victims after they read a poem. Basically, it shows up, but it's often described as a shadowy figure wearing a black coat and hat with long claw-like hands. And I thought that was, I mean, who does that sound like? You know,
Yeah.
different culture, different name. And then there's also the Celtic lure that is called and I'm going to tear this one up too, the Ferderg, Ferdearg, or red caps. I've always heard red caps as the little small gnome-like creatures, the mean ones that eat people, basically. But
Yeah.
these are considered tall, sinister men dressed all in black, wearing black stovetop hats, and or sometimes a red hat because the hat has just been dipped in human blood. Which that's the story I've always heard that go along with the gnomes. Did you find it?
I found it.
Yay!
Yay for tabs. What's it? Big Sur.
Big Sur, yes.
The figures dwell around Big Sur, California, a scenic and rugged, undeveloped section of the Santa Lucia Mountains, where the
Yep.
coast range forms a sharp incline from the Pacific Ocean off the coast.
Enzo had just posted Dark Watchers around is it Santa how is it
Santa
pronounced?
Lucia
Santa
or
Lucia
Santa
Mountains.
Lucia,
Santa
Santa
Lucia? Yeah, I
Lucia,
don't
Santa
know.
Lucia. I don't know.
Somebody will correct us, I'm sure. Somebody
John
always does.
Steinbeck. John
Steinbeck.
Steinbeck.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was him. Thank you. That would
Yeah,
have
it
bothered me.
was. He talks about them in his story Flight, which is part of his 1938 collection of short stories called The Long Valley.
Yes. Ian
Yeah.
said, is that another destination on your never ending road trip, Enzo? I better be, and he better take lots of pictures. That would be super cool, though.
Yeah, it would be.
But yeah, they're seen standing just on the edges of the mountains, the cliffs up there, and they're really
Mm-hmm.
creepy. And if you go to try to take pictures of them, they are gone. Nobody's been able to get a picture of them up there.
Yeah.
Uh, Enzo said, with my travel list, it's just easier to limit it to Earth. Why limit it there? Boldly go.
All right. So, did we do we want to hop into some of the stories, or do we want to? Do you have a little anything more on
We can, and then
before?
we can go back and forth.
Yeah, because I know we both have theories on what we think this might be, or some theories on some different things, but I think we should probably tell a few of the stories so then kind of get a
Absolutely.
grasp
Yeah.
of some of the insanity. I'm going to start off because I'm going to do two of the really early ones so you guys can
Cool.
see that this is not a new thing whatsoever. This is not new. I have an account. This is actually from a lady named Eleanor. This is her diary entry they found from 1891. She lived in London, England. Um, so Eleanor describes waking up in her family's townhouse to find a tall man in dark clothing and a tall hat standing at the foot of her bed. At first, she believed it to be an intruder, but when she attempted to scream, she found herself paralyzed. The figure simply stood there, its face obscured by darkness. I tried to move, but my limbs would not obey. He did not step forward, nor did he retreat. He merely watched me. Though I could not see his face, I felt a sensation most dreadful, as though I were prey to some unholy presence. Then, without sound or motion, he disappeared, fading like the mist at dawn. So I thought that one was it's dead nuts on,
It is,
right?
absolutely. And again, they didn't have the words for it. We didn't have a name for it back then. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, the next one
I
I
would
had was
agree.
super interesting. I'd never heard of this before, and I'm going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive on this and maybe come back on a different show and talk about it a little bit. Maybe one of our shows where we do multiple, like Ripley's Believe It or Not thingies. But while I was looking for it, I found an entire like flap of Hatman encounters that happened during World War II, oddly enough. Um, in During 1943, during Nazi occupied France, he was seen all over the place, not just at nighttime. He's seen during the day.
Wow.
Um, the accounts, of course, were widespread. The one that I took down because I thought was interesting was from a lady named Marie. She recalled seeing a tall, shadowy man wearing a hat outside her family's home multiple times during the war. She described him as always standing still, never speaking. She and her younger sister would see him from their bedroom window, always positioned just beyond the furthest tree line. She woke up one night to find him inside her room. I could see him clearer than before. He was darker than the night itself, standing near the door. I could not see his face, but I knew he was watching. He had a huge black hat. I felt frozen, unable to scream or move. My sister saw him too. Marie later learned that similar figures had been reported all throughout her own village. She believed he was warning of a tragedy. Shortly after her encounter, their neighbor's home was bombed, killing the entire family. To Marie, he became the harbinger of death. So this makes sense. A lot of people think that he's kind of like a bad omen or a
Hmm.
harbinger of doom, kind of like they accuse the Mothman of.
Yep.
Um, so they're sometimes called like a crisis apparition, if you
Yes.
will.
Yep.
Um, Bad omen, something bad's coming, and it could be bad or good. Maybe he's causing it, or maybe he's giving you the heads up.
Yeah. And I actually have one that goes along with that. You want me to read it really quick?
Yeah, go for
Okay. Let me, it's not the top one on my list. I should have looked before I said that. Hang on.
it. Well, while you're looking for it, I have a little short one.
Okay,
This
cool.
one came out of Tennessee in 1958. This guy's name was Robert. He recalled seeing the Hat Man as a child in an old home his family just moved into. He would see him standing in the hallway between his and his parents' bedrooms, and it never moved. Later, his grandfather saw it too and refused to sleep in that house after that. I like how the grandfather won't stay there, but he'll gladly let his family
Heck yeah.
hang out
For
in there.
preservation, he can have the kids. Okay, I found it. So this says I saw the Hat Man once when I was a child. He appeared in my room while I was alone playing with toys in broad daylight. Less a top hat and more of a wide brimmed fedora from the outline of his figure, though, with the only other details I could make out being two red eyes and long claw like fingers. It told me to get out, and I did. So there's an audible audio, you could hear it, and the long clawed fingers and the red eyes. So you've got some interesting things going on here. Says,
Mm-hmm.
told me to get out, and I did. By the time I brought my mom back up, he was gone. Weird thing is, my window was open, which I wasn't large enough to do yet, and which my mom had left closed religiously since I was on the second floor of the house. So that might be a not a harbinger of death, but a warning, a
Mm-hmm.
you know thing, because it really sounds like somebody was probably in that room, and when that
Yeah.
little boy went out of there, he or it or whatever it was went out the window.
Yeah. I have a couple of those too. These are actually there's more of these than what I that I knew. I'd heard of a couple of them before, and then you just gotta assume. I always assumed, well, maybe it wasn't an actual hat man. Maybe it was just a ghost, and the dude had a hat.
Yeah.
Which could be very well be the case in some of these. We don't know
Hmm.
for certain that this is a particular entity, but um. So here's a really this one is a really interesting one because in it he's not the bad guy. Um, we rented the upstairs of this really old house from our landlady downstairs. The rooms were huge, so me and my three sisters would share one room. I was younger at this time, about 9. I remember I used to crawl out of bed during the winter and lay on this big bearskin rug that we had to sleep. I
Ew.
isn't that yeah? I was asleep one night on the rug and it felt like someone was trying to wake me up. You know, that loving type of wake up where someone just whispers and nudges you a bit. So I was kind of waking up, smiling, and I see this featureless man in a top hat and trench coat with a cane. Like I could see the outline and everything, and he was bent over. And it was black, but kind of brown, because I realized I could see a glow from a fire through him. Just as I thought, excuse me, but I just thought he was this kind man, and I kind of blinked, and he was gone. And I registered, holy crap, that's a fire. The donut shop next to us had some live wiring from a storage building they destroyed in the back, and it caught the whole place on fire, and it was raging. My mom was out at a bar and had just left us. So I woke my sisters up and we got to the door just as the firefighters were trying to get in. So
Holy
whatever
cow.
this thing was,
It
it woke
saved
her
him.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
in a loving way, like he tenderly woke her up.
Wow.
So,
Ian said, were the hats contemporary to the period that they were seen in? Not always.
not always. I did think about that a little bit, but they are sometimes too. But the hats change. Like
Hmm.
today, they report top hats and bowler hats and fedoras and stove, the really tall, like Lincoln
Yeah,
type
stovetop,
hats, the
stovepipe.
sombreros,
Yeah.
wide brimmed like cowboy hats.
Hmm.
So it's a weird phenomenon.
Whoops.
Um,
Wrong one.
this
Sylvain's here. Hi, Sylvain.
Hi Sylvain. Uh, the next one I had was really crazy. It's got a
It's like
couple
built-in
different.
babysitters. Enzo said lots of
Yeah,
irresponsible. Can't talk. Lots of irresponsible adults around there. The Hat Man was the only one looking out for the kid. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's like a
yeah.
built-in
No joke.
babysitter, fairy godmother.
Okay, so this one, it said, I had been experiencing sleep paralysis pretty often and had seen these shadow people on several occasions. But one night I woke up to them circling my bed. They moved faster and faster until they became a blur. Then I saw one that was not moving standing inside the circle. He came over and hovered over my bed, and he was wearing a top hat. When he saw that I saw him, he aggressively got in my face and moved his head around mine like he was trying to smell me or something.
Ew.
Yeah, I struggled and struggled to wake up, and then I managed to somehow roll or fall onto the floor. As I was sitting there, I saw myself only when I was little, sitting cross legged on the floor in front of me. It was full color, but transparent, sort of like a hologram. My younger self said to me, "Be careful, or it's going to be okay," or maybe both. I don't quite remember. The message was unclear. I crawled into my mother's room, and she was laying in the bed, propped up on a bunch of pillows, but my dad wasn't in the bed with her. I told her I was scared, and she said, "Me too." I said, "I had a bad dream," and she said, "So did I." And I said, "What did you dream about?" But at this point, she lifted the covers on my dad's side of the bed. I got in bed with her, and she lifted my arm into the air. At this point, I actually woke up from the dream, and my arm was in the air. I stayed up the rest of the night freaking out because I knew that dream must have meant something. About a week later, early one morning, a neighbor woke me up to tell me that my father was outside being taken by ambulance because he was having a bad dizzy spell. I got dressed and went outside. They were loading him in at this point, and all I could see were his feet. As soon as I saw his feet, I knew he was going to die. Everyone else said, no, he was just dizzy. We got to the hospital, and about a half hour later, we found out a blood clot hit the back of his brainstem, and he passed away. I
Oh,
know that it was the omen.
oh, that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you think about back through it, her mom lifting the bed sheet and her dad's not there,
Yeah.
and and she didn't even realize she was dreaming, or maybe she wasn't dreaming and she
It
just
was like
got
a
zapped
dream
back into
log.
her bed.
Yeah.
you know I don't know. Goo.
Chelsea said maybe future generations will see Hat Man with beanies or backwards baseball caps.
I don't know if that'll be quite as scary.
Interestingly, not baseball caps, probably the most popular hat right now. Yeah, that's funny. Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
I have one that involves a mom too. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay.
Um, okay. Yeah, here it is. I was watching TV shows and I had this desire, feeling, urge, whatever you want to call it, to crane my head out to look into the hallway. It was approximately 9 p.m. or so, and the house was black, save for the hue of my TV. When I craned my neck out to look, in the middle of the hallway between the bathroom and my bedroom that I didn't want to sleep in, was a tall, blacker than the black of night, actually, is what they said, figure with a hat on its head and a round thing in its hand. It did not have red eyes. It did not say anything or make any noise. It just stood there, making itself known, and then quietly walked or floated to the left. And I could hear the metal door in my bathroom leading to the patio pool area open and close. And man, did I scream bloody murder for my parents. I would too. Pissed my dad off. The sleeping in the room took, so they were sleeping in the bedroom with their parents, took a toll on my father, and he got really nasty with me and demanded that I start sleeping in my own room again. That's when my mother spoke up and said to him, no, he's not going to be sleeping. No, he's going to be sleeping with us because I saw the same thing. She said that she saw it in the daytime when she was washing dishes in that same hallway in the back bedrooms. My mom's not a spooky kind of person, and she said she thought, it was the angel of death. My mom was telling me one day she was washing dishes, and the way our kitchen was set up at the time was you had the bar, and then she could see clear to the back. So it's an open concept area back to where the bedrooms are. Um, so she said that she just happened to look over and see, and this one's interesting. She saw a tiny man wearing a suit and a top hat walk by that opening by the kitchen door, look at her, look away, and then just continue walking. But she never saw him again at the second opening where she should have, because he was just right
Yeah.
there. And she would see wisps of smoke constantly in the house. So there's that foggy, wispy thing again. We thought all the activity in the house was subjected to those back bedrooms. I remember my dad, my mom, and I watching something on TV one night, sitting on their bed, And my dad had this pink recliner by the opening of their doorway. He loved this thing. I remember that we all looked over at the same time towards the doorway and saw something pitch as black peering up over the top of that recliner. And when we made eye contact with it, it took off towards wherever else in the house. So it zipped out the door. I would be like, okay, so they all three saw it at that point.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's not
Yeah.
creepy at all. But the tiny little man with
The
the
tiny
top
little man,
hat
the top hat.
and saw
Interesting.
her and just toddled on his way,
My goodness.
Pretty wild.
Enzo said she saw the WB frog.
Yeah. Yes,
The Warner
for
Brother frog.
sure.
Hello,
Um,
my baby.
yeah, what was his name? Jefferson. Is it Jefferson?
Something K frog.
Is it
Can't
Jefferson K.
remember.
Frog?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Somebody look it up in the chats.
It's the Artful Dodger. Could be. Tiny person in a top hat.
Michigan Frog. That's what it
That's
was.
it. Michigan J. Frog. What did I say? Jefferson? Oh,
Yeah.
well, it's
Yeah,
close.
well, close enough. I found one here. It's super short. It's like a omen one. My dad saw the Hat Man while riding his mower yesterday, right before he flipped it into the creek. He told me he saw a shadow that looked just like the Marble Man. It had a long coat on and a hat, standing beside a tree and watching him mow the grass. I knew immediately he had seen the Hat Man. I told him about it, but he'd never heard of this before. So I think either the Hat Man caused him to freak out and he flipped it into the creek, or the Marble Man guy was there giving him a heads up.
Oh,
I
maybe.
don't know, like an omen.
Yeah. Goodness, that's wild.
Yeah,
That makes me think of, the silhouettes that they have made out of the heavy metal that they
yeah,
lean on trees and yards. That's what that makes me think of. It's one of the
yeah.
silhouettes.
With his boot kicked up or
Yes.
whatever. Yep.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. This is in response to somebody's question about them. It says, I've seen them before. The first time was a brief sighting with a top hat. But it was fast and unremarkable, like meaning no feelings of dread or fright. The second time was around 2011, and I was doing some stuff in my garage. I turned around, and there were two of them there, and it looked like shadows like the noir style detectives.
Mm-hmm.
Trench coat, a derby or fedora type hat. But it was like they didn't see me, and it was like they turned away and looked over their shoulders, but it was hard to tell because they were like 3D shadows. They were all black. But when they turned, it would have been to face this person. And what I interpreted that movement as was, oh shit, there's somebody here and they just saw us. And then boom, they were gone. And that
Yeah.
makes me think, we were doing the owl episode, and it would be like they would see the little alien, it would stand there and be going, owl, 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 when you
Yeah.
see it, it's like, don't look, it saw us, we got to get out of here kind of thing. Like they were
Yeah.
surprised you could see them.
I found an interesting one. I didn't put it down here because it was so short. I didn't think it was worth it because I could remember it. But it the way it acts, it like it was flipping how many dimensions it was. So this one happened in a
Hmm.
hospital, and we'll have to talk about hospital a little bit because they pop up a lot in hospitals.
Yep.
This one happened in a hospital. This lady had been talking about she had put her grandmother into the hospital. She'd had a horrible stroke and she wasn't doing well. And the nurses were claiming that she was having these nighttime visions, hallucinations of something, and they asked the daughter to stay with her overnight so she could kind of see what was happening, and maybe they could form a plan to kind of help her through these nights. And she said her grandma was complaining that there was a gigantic, tall shadow on her wall that had a big hat, and that it would stand there and grow bigger and shorter and bigger and shorter all night long and stare at her with red glowing eyes. But
Ugh.
she said the grandma kept saying, I can hear his hat on the wall. I can hear his hat on the wall, like it was brushing on the wall as it went up and down. And the daughter stayed with her overnight, and she said halfway through the night she woke up and because she could hear something, and she looked over at that corner, and she said it was a perfectly like flat to the wall, like somebody might have been standing in front of an open door with a light behind it, and it was casting the shadow onto the wall, but it was completely black. And it grew, and as it grew you could see the hat kind of take shape as if it was 3D and brush up against the wall, and then it would flatten back out again. And then as it came back down, the hat would kind of come back out 3D, brush down the wall, and then go back flat again.
You
As if
know,
it was changing dimensions. You know what I mean? Like it
yes,
was going from like
yes.
2D to 3D, but just the hat.
We've talked about this before that 3D, we're in 3D, but we're third
Mm-hmm.
dimension. So fourth dimension creatures would pretty much be a shadow to us. We wouldn't be able to see them because we're not able to see that. But what we could see is a shadow. So that would kind of make sense in that case, where it would, if it was more, it was there, but if it was casting to her eyes, his eyes, like a
Mm-hmm.
shadow, it would bend and fold around the wall and stuff. So that's interesting.
Yeah. But I thought it was super interesting. Just the hat would kind of pop out almost 3D as it ran up the wall, and then it would go flat again, like that flat shadow. And then
Yeah.
as it came down, it would come back out again and then back down again. And unfortunately, that her grandma passed like that next day. And then that shadow was gone. The nurses reported that they never saw it again. So,
Huh.
yeah.
So is it, I mean, and I have that written off to the side. Some people have talked about it being, in some cases, an angel of death, and we've talked about it, a harbinger of death, or, harbinger of
Yeah.
danger at least.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, shadow people in hospital, especially like hospice type situations, are actually
Mhm.
quite prevalent, and hat men are often talked about in those situations. I found a few of those stories too, but it's the same kind of situation with everything else we've been talking about. Sometimes they are, like Pam said, like a harbinger, or like they're coming to take souls with them.
Yeah.
And other times they're there just to comfort sometimes. um I was trying to remember. I saw one where it was talking about this gentleman was in hospice care. He had very bad cancer, was getting ready to pass, and he kept talking every day to the nurses about the man who would come and stay with him all night long because he was scared. And he would just talk to him and tell him about who else was in the hospital at that time, and this guy in turn would tell him stories from his childhood, and he would just sit and listen in this chair beside his bed. But every morning when this guy woke up, that chair was gone. And he
Oh,
kept
that's
telling the
interesting.
nurses, who is this, who's this very nice gentleman who keeps visiting me? He's keeping me feeling okay during the night when I'm so scared. And they're like, there's nobody here at night. We're shut down at night. No visitors are allowed in. But he was this tall gentleman that was wearing a pea coat and a top hat, all completely black. He could never see his face because it was dark.
So he recognized his fear and helped him. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Very cool. Hmm.
yeah. I was.
Here's a fun one.
Okay.
It says, I've had several bouts of sleep paralysis and have never experienced this or any other kind of entity that I'm aware of. Afternoon naps were a normal part of my young life, and this particular nap took place about 35 years ago in a first floor bedroom. I was awakening from a deep sleep facing a window. I realized that I could look out the window into the front yard, but could not move any part of my body, even to speak. Before I could gain the use of any voluntary muscles, a man wearing a fedora style hat and a long coat slowly walked by the window from right to the left. All the while, as this man walked past my window, he pivoted his head to maintain direct eye contact with me. Knowing that this person's presence was highly irregular, I was filled with a deep feeling of dread. This man wearing a hat absolutely exuded a strong essence of malevolence. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Could you imagine looking, number one, you're sleep paralysis, so but you're awake. So you're looking and you see this thing, and this thing obviously sees you because as it walks by, it just keeps looking at you. Duh.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Gross.
So could it, I mean, the deep feeling of dread could been from the fact she couldn't move, she couldn't protect herself at all, or
Yeah. Um, the ominous feeling and the feelings of dread come with almost all of these stories. But like Pam was talking about earlier, that's also a precursor to time storms,
yes.
along with the fog and the weird darkness. Is that somehow looped in? It's all connected.
Enzo said peacoat and top hat. What a fashion faux pas,
Yeah,
right?
word. I don't know what that dude was thinking.
And Ian said palliative care can be odd given the drugs administered at that stage. Sounds comforting, though. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
But there you go again, while you're on those drugs, does it slip you down into some kind of an area where you're capable
It
of seeing
opens
these
up your mind,
things?
kind of thing.
You
Yeah.
know, double-edged sword there, could go either way.
Here's
I
Karen.
found
Hi,
another.
Karen.
Hi, Karen. I found another hospital one, and this one isn't that far from us. And this one I thought was an interesting case because it belongs to a building, like it's always been there.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is at the former St. Joseph's Hospital on the campus of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Science, and the Arts.
Wow.
Um, Portions of the hospital once served as residential living space for students and later as classrooms and faculty offices after 2012 when the Student Center, the current residential space, was opened. So it's still being used by students. They call it the Tall Man, and it's been there since the hospital opened. The Tall Man is the resident shadow figure seen by generations of campus staff, students, and hospital workers and patients. The figure is a tall shadow man in a black coat and a wide black hat who carries a bag with him. He hangs out in dark stairwells and shadowy corners. Reports began when the building was used as a hospital. The tall man was often seen lurking around accident victims and patients who were getting ready to or had just passed. An alumna from one of the first years of the school reported a story of her climbing the stairs and suddenly feeling a spike of fear. As she started running up the stairs, she saw out of the corner of her eye the tall man wearing black with a black hat chasing her up. So it crept out of the shadows on the stairwell and chased her up it. Ugh.
Man.
Yeah.
Enzo said, my sister is a hospice nurse. Whenever a patient starts talking about seeing people that aren't there, they know they'll be going within 72 hours. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you're interested in that, and if you've not seen it yet, we did a whole show on hospice nurse
Hmm.
stories over on The Fringe,
Fringe. Yeah.
and you can go back on YouTube and watch that on the What If Tomorrow Media page.
Hmm.
Super interesting. Very very sad though. I enjoyed that show, and I didn't enjoy that show at the same
Yeah. It
time.
was, heart wrenching, but it was fascinating still.
Yeah.
And Karen said at Enzo, yes, having nursed many dying patients, it is common unless they're in a coma. Yeah.
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 All right. Gosh, me, I have so many more stories. I don't know what to tell.
Right.
Maybe we should
There's some
maybe
really
we
good
should talk
ones.
a little bit. We'll take a break from the stories and talk a little bit about our theories on what else we think they could be or their origins. Did you
Yeah,
want to
we
talk a little
can.
bit about that?
We can. I so theory wise,
Oops. Nothing.
you know what's going to
Wasn't
happen? It's a
me.
domino effect. You're going to knock one thing down, and your entire studio is going to go
I
boom.
know. It's an artalanche.
An avalanche.
An
Woo!
artalanche.
We'll
Okay, we're
have to
okay.
come dig Jess out. That's funny.
Yep.
So, um, I tend personally, from everything that I've read, heard, um, and anything in between, I really kind of feel like they are more of an interdimensional being, or maybe a
Mm-hmm.
fourth dimension, which is interdimensional. Um, Basically dipping into to look at us, or I don't know how. What are we to them? Are
Yeah.
we just an interesting little artifact in their world? Which more than likely, yeah. But yeah, you look at the fact they're elusive. They come and go quickly. So that really suggests that whatever their abilities are, it's definitely beyond the abilities that we have as human beings. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's kind of my theory. I think it's something interdimensional.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if I quite have a full working theory, but I know there's a lot of theories that I think have some points to them that make sense.
Mhm.
Um, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, of course, points to the gin. She points to the gin on everything. I don't know if I quite agree with that. I it's just like we always say, everything's connected, and I think she took that and picked one thing.
Oh. Karen said your audio is low and mine's really loud. So sorry. I didn't realize that. I'll move
Oh,
my mic too.
okay. Well, I'll move that a little
There, is that a
closer.
little better? I don't have my big mic on tonight. I have my little one.
All right.
Thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
Enzo said something peeking in from another dimension is one thing, but why the hats? Yeah, that's the curious part.
I actually have like a little theory on that. I doubt it's true or has much to it, but there was a while when I considered because it's some kind of a hat, but it's always in different shapes. And having not seen a hat man of my own, I can't say for certain, yes, it looked exactly like a top hat or it was exactly a fedora. I always wondered if maybe, like Pam said, like it was some kind of an interdimensional, and I hate to say the word alien because everybody just automatically thinks of the little gray aliens, but think of some kind of other creature. And maybe that's the shape of their head, you know? Maybe
Maybe.
that's their shape. And when we see it, your brain automatically starts matrixing. It starts coming up with the most plausible thing that you can
Hmm.
point to. So if you see that shape, you're automatically going to think, oh, it's a hat and a long coat. But maybe that's their shape. I don't know. I always thought maybe there was something to that. Maybe we're seeing something interdimensional and that's just its shape. Maybe their head shapes are kind of different than ours.
That's
And
as
we just,
plausible as anything else,
yeah, we just
honestly.
shove a hat there in its
Yeah.
place. Oh, it must be a hat that's on its head. I don't know. But like I was talking about, Rosemary says Jen,
Conehead.
Coneheads. I'm not quite fond of her theory, but like we always talk about, everything is connected. There's some connection somewhere, and she believed the same thing too, but she kind of threw the cap on the gin, which
Mhm.
I don't particularly care for. I kind of like, if you're fans of Harry Potter, you remember Pam. What was the little creature that could change into
Bobby.
anything?
No,
No,
I could change
the
it
little,
into anything.
yeah, they would. In one of the classes, they would let it pop out, and it would become whatever you were scared of.
Oh, oh my gosh. Demen
You,
Dementor? Is that a Dementor? No.
no, a Bogart,
Oh, a Boggart.
a
Yeah,
Boggart,
a Boggart.
a
Sorry.
Boggart. In Harry Potter, it was a creature that nobody knew what it looked like because the minute you laid eyes on it, it knew whatever you were scared of and became that. And they would have these classes where they would have them pop out in front of the kids, and the kids would practice turning them back into a Bogart. But they would never see it because they would just throw it back into a trunk again. And that's kind of how I feel about what Rosemary was doing with this. The Jinn are known for being anything that they want to be to do what they need to get done. And I think what she was doing was just throwing the cap on the Bogart, is what she was doing.
Maybe so, yeah.
I don't know. That's my opinion. Although, super interesting. If you ever get the chance, go and read some of her books on the Jinn.
They're
Regardless
really
of the
good.
theory being weird for me, the information in it and her thoughts on a lot of these things are just so interesting. She's like the queen of the
It
Jinn.
is. She did
So,
kind of make it an umbrella term for everything paranormal at
she
some point,
did.
though. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Enzo said the Pascagoula aliens kind of had that head shaped like a silhouette of someone wearing a hat.
Oh, there you go.
And Ian said, imagine having a head shaped like a sombrero.
Be great for chips and dip, though.
Oh, that's true. It's a good point.
Just have a snack. My gosh.
So, okay, I have a question for you, Jess, because I
Okay.
did not find an answer to this one. I was looking for like statistics on numbers of sightings or things like that. Did you find anything in regards to how many potential sightings there have been?
No, I don't think so. I haven't. But that mean, well, that would be like trying to guess how many people have seen, you know, uh, uh,
That's
ghost
true.
in their house. I mean, it's kind of like, I always
It's
point
so
back to it.
subjective.
Brian Terrell,
Yeah.
in his, when it comes to Bigfoot, out of 10 sightings, only 3 people will report it.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
a good
really
point.
hard to do statistics on something that's kind of obscure in a way.
It's obscure and it's global. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a global phenomena. It's not just centered
Yeah. It,
on, one portion of the world. It's
yeah.
widely experienced, so it would be hard to pin down. But no, I wasn't able to find any. I looked.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, here's an interesting one. I'm going to do another story.
Okay.
Um, so this one actually like interacted with some things in the room, which I thought was completely interesting because usually they're just a shadow and very quiet. This one says I was 16. It was in the wee hours of the morning. I had a bag on the floor, and it's almost like this thing kicked it when it was walking. It woke me up when the bag flew, and I looked over and saw this massive shadow across my room. It froze, and I froze, and I was so scared I couldn't even move. He was almost to the ceiling. There was just enough light in my room to make out the outline of his hat and coat, but not him fully. After what felt like an eternity, he just melted into the floor and disappeared. I regained composure and reached out to turn on the TV that was beside my bed so I could have some light. I was so scared I didn't go back to sleep. One night, when I was first with my then boyfriend, now husband, I was having a nightmare of the Hat Man leaning over the bed and putting a needle in my eye.
Oh
That's,
god.
yeah, that same night, my boyfriend was awoken by someone bumping into our bed. He told me in the morning a very large shadow man with a hat was leaning over the bed, describing him fully as what I had seen when I was 16. He quickly vanished, but it was like his knee had bumped the bed, waking up my boyfriend. In the morning, I awoke with an awful headache. I had told him previously about my nightmares and seeing the Hat Man once in my late teens, so this wasn't a new revelation. I had not given him all the details, and he provided me the details I had left out on exactly what this thing looked like. I told him about the nightmare after he told me he'd seen him. When we lived in another house a few years after we were married, we both were lying in bed looking up at the ceiling and saw there were massive fingerprints all over our fan, as if someone had perched on the fan and wrapped their fingers around each blade. My boyfriend measured them, and the thumb alone was 6 inches long.
Good grief.
Yeah, so could you imagine those big old, like it was hanging up there by your fan?
Oh my goodness. That's weird.
Blech. But I've never
Yeah.
heard of one where you like it was like kicking stuff across the room. So
That's strange.
yeah,
And so it said sinking into the floor gave me the visual of the demons from the movie Ghost. Yeah.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. Did you have any other stories you wanted to
You
tell?
know, this isn't a story, but it just makes me, I'm just an observation. A lot of these
Okay.
that we're seeing, I wonder too if they show up, how some energy spirits, meaning spirits, seem to feed off of energy. So, what if these are spirits or entities that feed off of fear? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have no. They're strange. I mean, that's why I called the show The Enigma because like almost no none two are alike. They have just enough alike to be something, but not enough alike to pinpoint cause or um, whys or wins or wheres.
Must have just watched A Nightmare on Elm Street. Could have been.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of nightmares, here's one for you. And this one was super interesting. This one's starting to act like something else. I was in elementary school in the 1980s, and I was petrified of the tall hat man that watched me every night as I went to bed. I frequently thought I saw his silhouette in the tree by my second story window, so it wasn't even in the room with him. I think I was around 6 to 8. He was a lanky man with a hat and a coat. He reminded me of Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas. He could walk on the power lines, and he carried a cane. He could stand perfectly balanced on the lines, too. And this was especially terrifying because he was more visible and he looked squarely at me. Sometimes he scraped his long nails on the window, making the creepiest sound, like a branch scraping with the piercing screech of nails on a chalkboard.
Oh my gosh.
I was afraid he would come in through my window, which would have been impossible, or which would have been possible because even though I was on the second floor, there was a porch roof on that side of the house. I don't think the Hat Man ever came inside. I never told anyone because I assured myself it was childish imagination. I don't think I ever saw the Hat Man in an actual dream. I was always wide awake and petrified. I felt fear. I'm not sure what I thought might happen. Something supernatural, I suppose. I was afraid of being taken or killed. When the Hat Man was out there watching, I would lay there feigning sleep because I thought something bad would happen to me if he knew that I was in there. I would lay as still as I could. I would hold my breath so my blankets wouldn't move, and I would hide my head in a shadow because I wanted to be able to see, but I didn't want to be seen. Whether or not I saw him probably didn't faze him, but I believe he wanted to be seen. Like sleep paralysis, I would feel frozen or immovable, but my sightings of him occurred at bedtime before falling asleep. I saw him frequently over the span of maybe 4 years, but after childhood, I never saw him again, and I never told anyone until now.
Wow.
So
That's
this
wild.
thing hung out every night. Could you imagine living like that? Having that, walking the power lines outside your room?
No. Enzo said, man, I don't really need power to my house. Snip.
Yeah,
No joke. And Ginger said
creepy.
maybe they, going back to even on the hospital stories, maybe they feed
Hmm.
off of illness or death. And that could be because if you think about the fact there's good humans and there's bad humans, some are mean, some are nice. What if there's the same when these entities are around? There's some of them are nicer, so they're going to be gentle. They're going, like waking him up gently or whatever, or telling them to get out of the house because of danger. And then there's others that are just mean about it. Who knows? I don't know. That's a matter of trying to put human emotions onto something that's obviously not human. So I don't even know if it would apply. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know. It's interesting to
So
talk
weird.
about, though. Let's see
Did
what
you
I'm
want to,
missing here.
like I
But
said,
I
I got
want.
tons of stories. We can do stories all night if we wanted to. There's so many of them. And like I said, if you're interested in this, oh, I know one thing that I can talk about if Pam should
Okay.
look for some stories. Um, this, of course, is getting to be a very popular topic, of course, just because it's been so prevalent among people and people are finally starting to talk about it a lot. There is a gentleman named Timothy M. Brown Jr., and he
Yes.
started something he calls the Hat Man Project. He was so interested in the phenomenon, he actually started his own webpage based just on the Hat Man. He's currently working on a book and some documentaries right now. But you can go to his page, it's just called the Hat Man Project. And you can go check out all these stories that people have submitted, and you can submit your own too if you've ever had a Hat Man sighting. Enzo says he definitely would invest in some blackout curtains over that window. Yeah, unfortunately, I
100%.
think that kid was like 6. It happened for him from the time he was 6 to the age of 8. So he probably didn't have a whole lot of money for blackout curtains.
I do have a friend. that, and I don't have her permission to tell this story, so I won't name her. Um, but for years, she's lived in the same house for a good, let's see, close to 30 years, probably, maybe 30 years. And she would wake up in the middle of the night and see this black man shaped thing with a hat standing at the end of her bed. And it never, I mean, startled her, yeah, but it never scared her. She was never fearful of it or anything like that. And she found out just within the last few years that her kids had been seeing it too, and they just never talked about it. Um, one of them doesn't live at home anymore. The other one does, but yeah, they've seen it. They just never thought to actually bring it up to anybody else. I think they all thought, and that happens a lot with these stories.
Yeah.
Somebody in the house, they'll see something, they don't want everybody else to think they're crazy, so they don't mention it. And then years down the road, they'll finally get around to being, hey, did you ever? And then find out the entire time everybody or more than one person was experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, there's reason, you don't want to be called nuts.
Yep.
You don't want to be poo pooed away, which your parent almost always is going to do. Oh, you were just dreaming or whatever. And number three, if you say it out loud, it makes it more real. So if you
Yes.
pretend, you can pretend like maybe it didn't happen. Like if I don't tell other people about it, it didn't really happen. So
Hmm.
I think that's how that works.
No joke. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Ooh, you know what we should do? We should pull up photos.
Yeah, we could absolutely do that. I'm digging through my notes to see if I'm missing anything big that I wanted to make sure we brought up. But we'll look at pictures while I'm looking for
Yeah. Yeah.
that. All right.
So I assumed when I started this that we wouldn't have any pictures of Hatman because he kind of lurks in the shadows, is hard to photo, and who has the time to reach and grab your phone? But we
Yeah.
found a few. So this one we're looking at here was taken at the South Pittsburgh Hospital in Tennessee. This is the second story hallway where they report a 7 foot tall Hat Man constantly. In fact, they now call it the Hat Man hallway. And his picture's been taken several times. This one here I chose because this is the only one I found where he was actually closer to the camera. He wasn't just some distant thing off of a back wall that could may or may not be a stack of boxes or something, in a fuzzy grainy picture. This one he's actually quite clear, so you can see on the second one I circled for you, he's actually standing front towards the camera, and you can see his shape. His head almost touches the top of that doorway, he's so tall.
It's
I
pretty
thought
wild.
this one
And
was, yeah.
you know what's really cool? I didn't realize that that's where this picture was from. You said it was South Pittsburgh, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
We had interviewed, the owner's name is Ronnie D, and we interviewed him a month or two ago on a muck, and we have a standing invitation to come investigate anytime we want.
Ooh, we go
I
see a
know.
Hat Man ourselves. That
Yes.
would be awesome.
How cool would that be?
That would be very cool. Oh, I do want to say, I do not own the rights to this photo, but I couldn't track down the original owner of it. It's all over the place. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. If you see this and you are the owner of this photo, please let us know so we can give you your props and we'll add
Yes,
it to the show notes.
absolutely.
Um, yeah. This one here I found extraordinarily interesting. Hatman is seen a lot in accidents. And I couldn't find any photos of him with the accidents because usually they're accidents that happen at night and he's reported, on the side of the road or whatever. But I found this one during the middle of the day. Now you can see, we've got all this fire trucks happening. This was a pileup on a highway. Several people lost their lives, unfortunately, in this accident. But they all kept reporting that they had seen this very, very dark, shadowy man in a full coat and a hat. And if you kind of look around at some of the people, this is summertime.
Hmm.
The grass is green. The dude up front here in the white car, he has on a pair of shorts. There's another dude back off by the fire trucks that's also wearing shorts. It's a warm day, and this dude that you're gonna see is wearing a full-on set of what looks like maybe dress pants, a trench coat, and a bowler hat. Yeah, right there where Pam's pointing. Now, on the next picture, I went ahead and blew it up so you could kind of see. They actually looked for this man for quite a long time because they, assumed he, had kind of maybe seen some of what had happened. We're going to use him as a witness. No one could ever find him. Just standing there staring at the accident.
And you know what's cool about this? Could it be faked? Maybe. I don't know. But he's just as pixelated as everything else is in the picture. It doesn't look like an overlay.
Yeah.
And he's not casting a shadow either.
Mm-mm. And this photo itself wasn't taken by a bystander. This was taken by emergency services that were taking photos around with the news crews. This is the only photo that he showed up fully in. I know there's one other photo where you can barely kind of see him around the fire truck, but this is it. I just thought it was completely amazing.
We were getting that's weird. Wow.
Yeah,
And Ian, okay, that's an odd one. It is. It's really strange.
it is.
Disconcerting for sure.
Yeah. And this one creeped me the heck out. Oh my goodness. I couldn't find any information on this family exactly, but I do know that part of the story behind it was that these three ladies that you see up here in the front in the white, they were actually getting ready to attend the funeral of their mother, unfortunately, and they had decided to take a little group photo in all of their brand new white dresses that they had purchased to go to the funeral. And after the photo was developed, of course, because this is back when we didn't have automatic photos that showed up on your phone. We had to wait for it to develop and come back. The Hat Man was standing behind them. And there was no one behind them because they were actually standing up against the
The
fence
fence.
that the Shadow Man is standing in front of. So
And
he's
he's
literally,
solid.
yeah, he's literally occupying the space of maybe a few inches. Because I'm sure they're not like right up against the fence because they're in their
Right.
nice new dresses. But yeah, he's right there.
That one is unsettling. Yeah, super creepy.
Yeah, even has maybe it looks like maybe a hand up over one of their
Oh,
shoulders.
it does. I missed that right
Yeah.
there.
Uh huh.
Yikes.
Yeah. Yikes.
Oh,
Ooh.
I have to watch something funny before I go to bed tonight. Okay, so this one was captured at Mylor Cemetery in Cornwall. Um, and you can plainly see this shadow hat man right there. And you can see the stone that's in front of him and the one that's behind him. So he's kind of in between the two. But that one's creepy too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chelsea said, "Nope, nope, 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 nope."
exactly.
Yeah. So I was
Cool.
surprised that we found photos at all, but
I
we
was
did.
too.
Yeah. Now I will say, if you go look up, photo Hat Man, you're gonna find tons of them, and some of them are just so god awfully faked.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
They're faked, and there's a lot that are just like renderings or AI or whatever.
Yeah, tons of those. It was
Yeah.
really hard to find something. In fact, I didn't find anything by just typing in, photo of Hat Man, real, and then, on Google Images. I couldn't find any that way. I actually found them through digging through the internet and finding personal
Yep.
stories and finding links to their own photos. So that's how I found mine. It was really hard. So enjoy.
Right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one while Pam's hunting up looking through her stuff there. This one happened in northern Kentucky. It says, I was about 15 or 16. I always slept with a locked door and a chair placed against my door to stop it from opening. One night I woke up at about 2:30 a.m. and in the middle of my room is this pitch black figure, probably 6 or 7 feet tall, slender, long fingers, just staring at me in my bed. The door to my room was wide open, and the light from the foyer was on and shining through the doorway. Next to the tall black man was this large blue circle, just like perfectly floating in the air without moving. It wasn't a light, and it didn't seem spherical. It was just like a circle of blue, so it was flat like he was. It wasn't 3D, it was 2D. After a few seconds, the pitch black man just turns and walks out my door, and a few moments after, that blue circle just kind of slides across the air and out the door, too. I can
Oh,
remember it all extremely vividly to this day. So it had like a little blue buddy with him that was
that's
flat.
wild. So what was that?
I don't know. Could you imagine just a flat blue
No, that's
just sitting
crazy.
there and then just slid out of the room like, wait for me?
That's wild.
Yeah, I thought that one
Sounds
was
like a
strange.
Hatman and the Orb, kind of like Hootie and the Blowfish.
Nice.
That's wild. So I'm curious if anybody in the chat, if anybody's had an experience that go along with this,
Or know somebody.
or yeah, even know someone that has had an experience.
Yeah.
Um,
I've never personally experienced it. However, I will say when I was little, I was very prone to sleep paralysis. It happened to me constantly. But I can honestly say that even though I lived in a house that had some goings ons in it, I don't think I ever experienced anything while I was struggling waking up from the sleep paralysis. I got so good at it, I could just close my eyes and count to three and jerk myself up out of it. It happened so often, I got used to coming up out of it. So, but I've never actually experienced anything while I was having that. Luckily, it doesn't happen to me anymore. I don't think it's happened in a very long time.
hmm. Enzo said it's odd how sometimes they're 2D or 3D. It is.
Yeah,
It
it
is
really
weird.
is.
The whole thing's weird. The whole phenomenon is really strange. And the only other thing that I had that I wanted to make sure we got in here is the fact that experiences that people have had with the Hat Man, they've sometimes end up leading to ongoing fears of the dark or fears of being alone and created these lasting sleep disturbances. And others have claimed that they have the sense of being watched or being followed, which gives ends up with an anxiety and hypervigilance kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely been some negative impacts on people because of these experiences. But, there's been positives too. I've seen people with hats, but they're just people with hats. Yep. Enzo said the shadow Ken and I saw was 2D against the wall. It was quick. Ken wasn't sure what he saw till he noticed my head following it as it moved past. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. I have one that kind of talks about that just a little bit. It's really short. This one said, when I was 7 years old, I was really into reading until late at night, only with my table lamp on. I was reading one night and somehow I looked up at this white wall of my room and there he was. It was a shadow on the wall, but it wasn't looking towards me. It was as if it was facing to the side, with a trench coat and a wide hat, completely flat to the wall. He he wasn't completely black. It was more like gray cuz he seemed like a very faded shadow. When I saw him, I let out a gasp, and he heard me because he immediately began to walk fast. I saw him move along the wall and then through my walls to my open closet. There I lost track of him and didn't see him anymore. Till this day, it's one of my weird stories. I didn't feel threatened or scared by him. It was just weird. So could you imagine, like, I think it was like a shadow and it like followed along the walls.
Oh,
And
that's
then it
like
got to a certain point and it just slipped through the walls into his closet and disappeared.
that's like watching a spider go into your closet. You're like, nope, I need nothing in there ever again.
Burn it down.
Burn it to the ground. Okay, Chelsea said, when I was younger, I would see the shadow runners along the road as we'd be out driving. I've heard it's a pretty widespread phenomena, though. The ones I remember seeing were doing parkour or free running. I was never actually really scared of them. If anything, I was scared for them possibly hitting or something or falling. That's wild.
That
That's
is.
interesting. Hmm.
All right. So I have two stories here I'm going to tell really quick. And these were ones that actually happened in a dream, but they were so realistic and things during life like butted up against them. So you're like wondering, was it truly a dream or was it some kind of a lucid situation? So the first one, it said, I've always had encounters with paranormal entities, so fear is not usually a problem. But last night I dreamed that I was walking with my partner through a square, which I think they meant was like a park, and up a very tall tree was a shadow man. He greeted me, and when I tried to see exactly who it was, he threw himself from the tree and fell to his feet. It was a shadow, thin and tall man with a hat and a raincoat. I put my partner behind me, and when I tried to face him, the shadow opened his arms and raincoat and started running towards me very quickly. He tried to grab at me and wrap me inside of his coat.
Oh,
I felt
God.
like I couldn't I felt like I couldn't do anything because I was suddenly paralyzed. I managed to wake up, and when I woke up, I investigated and started finding all these stories about the Hat Man. Ew.
Gah.
Yeah.
No.
This one this one is nightmare fuel. So just heads up everybody. Um I saw him when I was 18 years old in my room after a particularly traumatic experience. I woke up at an incredibly late hour, probably 2 to 3 in the morning. I was speaking in a language that I have never heard before. I was speaking to what I can only describe as a young girl or something with the body type of a young girl, perhaps 14ish, in a dress. I couldn't make out her features, but I could make out her eyes and her mouth, which were sharp looking, like a human piranha or something.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, she was whispering something in my ear, and I kept replying to her in this strange language. But it wasn't just the shadow girl. My bed was surrounded by tall, dark figures with no features. About four of them, not counting the girl. They stood motionless, just watching me. But the most striking figure was a tall man in a wide brimmed hat standing in the corner of my room. I could feel as if he was amused at the whole situation. Each time the girl whispered in my ear, I would let out a reply in that language I didn't understand, and the man in the hat would just be delighted. You'd think that one would be scared of this sort of encounter, but it felt weirdly familiar. It felt warm, as if I was surrounded by old friends or family. I forgot to add that I was researching this encounter and came across a startling similar account. The person had an almost identical experience, minus talking in another language, or at all for that matter, and the little girl was yelling into her ear as opposed to whispering, as it was for me. Very weird.
That is odd. Piranha teeth, though? No, thank
Yeah,
you.
and
Yeah.
the hat man standing in the corner just thinking this whole situation is hilarious.
Oh, my God. No.
It's so weird.
About the other one, Chelsea said shadow flasher. Oh, hell no.
A flasher, yeah. Maybe he just wanted to sell him a watch.
That's it.
Oh my goodness.
Goodness. That's
I
wild.
know.
Wild, wild. Well, we've got, so there's global reports of this, right?
Hmm.
I'm thinking conclusion wise, can we come to a conclusion? I don't really think we can. Um, it's seen all over the world. It's hard to dismiss because it's seen all over the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's experienced by different cultures, that adds just a whole new layer of intrigue, if
Yeah.
nothing else. So I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's super interesting that it's seen in so many different places. So it's seen in dreams. It's seen while you're lucid dreaming. It's seen during the middle of the day.
Yes.
Um, it's seen in crashes, it's seen in hospitals, it's seen in all these different kinds of situations, whether it be kind of like a harbinger or a bad omen or a warning of some
Yeah,
kind, or sometimes it seems like it caused it. Like, there's no way to wrap it up in a tidy little bundle
there's
in any
not.
way.
There's
So,
not. I don't
I don't
know.
know.
It's pretty wild. That's the
It's
conclusion. We don't know.
We don't know
That's
what
our
the heck it
conclusion.
is.
We don't.
I
And
do know
honestly,
one
that goes
thing.
with a lot of the paranormal. We just don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah,
If they tell you they know, they're lying because nobody knows.
that's right. Nobody knows. I was
Mm,
going to
that's what
say,
makes
I
it
do know one
fascinating.
thing for certain, and that is that I do not want to see it
Yeah,
myself.
agreed.
I'm, I'm good.
Definitely not. I'm right there with you on
Yeah, don't
that.
want to see it, even if it's a
Not,
nice one.
nope, not one little bit. Nope, nope, nobody, nope.
Yeah. All right. So, there's a few books. If you are interested in looking this up or doing a little reading on it, I found a few books that I kind of fell in love with. And I'm going to tell you about them, and I will post them. I will post links to them on our page after all this is over with, like I usually do. The first one is The Hatman, The True Story of Evil Encounters by Heidi Hollis. This one's really good. It really goes into detail on kind of the origins. It delves back into, like early times and kind of like the mythologies and a little bit of like the Indian lore and the German style of it that Pam was talking about earlier. I can't remember what it was called. A knot
Um,
something.
Doctor something.
Yeah, succubus, blah 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 blah. Just a really good one. She tends to lean more towards like the really evil stories, and that's kind of how the book's named. Um, my next favorite one was The Hat Man by Gavin Wagstaff. He also does a really great job of kind of delving into like the history of it and kind of showing how it pops out in different centuries and stuff. And he had some great stories in there also. And then lastly, just for fun, I threw in The Hat Man by Bowen Rose. And it's the longest title ever. Terrifying tales of the dark figure who haunts dreams and reality, true Reddit stories to share around the campfire. And I say this is just a fun one. So, this is literally, he collected stories that he thought were really great from Reddit, and then he contacted those people and had them tell him like a better or a deeper version of it with some more details.
Nice.
So if you love Reddit, you'll love this book. It's a really short read too. So if you just want something for the evening to scare the bejesus out of yourself before you go to bed, pick up this book. Super great.
Yay. Cool.
Yeah.
And so they run the gambit of running off when noticed or outright attacking you on sight. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they need to get together and have like a union meeting and figure out what it is they're going to do.
At least they don't stand there and go, owl, 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 owl.
True. Although I did run onto a couple of stories where they talked. They said stuff like "you shouldn't be here" or "what were you thinking."
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pretty wild.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any more to add, or do you want to start notebook games a little early?
I think we should start notebook games
Okay.
because, yeah, I don't know what else to say. There's so many stories,
So
but
many
all of
stories.
them, they kind of get not repetitive, but you're seeing the same themes. So the stories that we chose tonight, that wasn't the only one like that. There was probably 10, 15 or more out there that were pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
So there's tons and tons. If you're interested in the topic, definitely check it out because there's some really neat stuff. Enzo said, "Ew, judgmental hat man," right? Wonder if they
Absolutely.
exchange hats at the hat man meetings. Maybe. I want the sombrero.
Okay.
Damn it.
You think they'd have like a box of hats they get to choose from every night?
Maybe so. You show up late. Damn it, I got the sombrero. Crap.
I wonder if there's like one crap hat in the bottom nobody wants, like it's a jester's hat or something like that, or
Maybe. Or it's
It's
the
a ski
caved-in
cap.
cowboy hat.
The
It's like
cave.
all wonky.
It's like, oh
You
man,
see
I'm
him,
supposed to get
everybody see
that
him sitting there
hat.
like, damn it.
All right, so we'll start notebook games. So go ahead, everybody, pick your thing 1 through 5, 1 through 75 on the pages. And I'm actually going to start out. I told Pam I was going to do this 2 weeks ago. When we were finishing up the last show, somebody threw in a notebook just as we were ending, and we didn't see it until after we were done. So I saved the page. I went and found it and marked it. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. I don't think they're in the chats this time, but if they ever pick it back up and go back and listen, they'll find their page. So I'm going to go ahead and
Yes.
read it while you guys are figuring out what pages you want. So this was Rebel in Oxford, and she or he chose Notebook 2, page 66. Hold on, my phone is buzzing. Let me turn that off.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
It's my kid. I'm going to have to call her back. Okay, so on this page is a BFRO report on Tebbets, Missouri. So it's a Bigfoot report, is what it is. Highway 94, November 10:30 to 11 p.m., Dead End County Road. It says, I was parking out in the woods with my date in the evening. And guess what they were doing? All of a sudden, my car began to shake. I looked out at the driver's side window and found myself looking at a huge face. We stared at each other, not over 3 inches from each other through the glass. I hurriedly started the car and put the headlights on. The first thing we saw was that now the animal was on the passenger side of the car and on all fours, as if it was trying to stay out of the light from the headlights. The animal hurriedly covered the 35 feet in front of the car and into the woods. It only stood up as it reached the trees. The speed that it moved was amazing. It was much faster than any deer. It was over 7 feet tall, brown, and had a large head, though we could not see the face. We quickly left the area and headed back to town. It took over an hour to get my girlfriend calmed down. Later, I noticed 2 muddy handprints and scratches left on the car. One was on the top, and one was near the door handle. It had a thumb and 3 fingers. Follow up. The head was huge, eyes round, and the mouth was somewhat open. Could not see the teeth. The mouth and nose seemed to be altogether more like a gorilla. And underneath of it, I made a note to myself that said Dogman maybe, because I was
Maybe.
thinking it getting down on all fours, and it said its nose and its mouth was together, so I was thinking more like a muzzle.
And a thumb and 3 fingers. That would be more
Yeah,
paw.
yeah.
Well,
So I
like,
thought probably more like a Dogman sighting.
maybe.
Yeah. I have this report because it's in Missouri. It's part of my reports when I was doing all the Bigfoot reports in the 4 states area.
Mm.
Yep. All
Enzo said,
right.
if the vans are rocking, yep.
That's true. So, Rebel in Oxford, if you're listening or you're going to listen to this later, there's the one that you chose that we missed at the very end of our
Yay.
previous show.
And we
So,
apologize. We saw it afterwards and we're like,
yes.
oh, man.
Yeah, we missed it. All
Okay.
right. So, what do we got?
Ginger, notebook 2, page 29, please.
Okie doke.
And while you're pulling that up, she said her child was calling her. My child texted. He ended up in the emergency room tonight because he ate red lentils and immediately looked like he was horribly sunburned. So he texted me back and he said, it does appear I am allergic to red lentils.
Oh, no.
Oh, crap. No, he
Uh-oh.
looked terrible. He said they sent me pictures and his girlfriend's in the background going, tell him he needs to go to the emergency room. And I'm like, I think I'd listened to her. When I saw the pictures, I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. You need to go.
Oh, no. Poor
Oh
Eric.
Lord. He's allergic to peas. We knew. Apparently he's also allergic to lentils. Hmm.
Aw. They might be in the same family.
That's what I'm thinking. They probably
Yep.
are.
All right. This page is on the Linda Ortega case.
Enzo said with the last one, at least it wasn't that creepy spider walk that gets reported. Ooh.
That's true. The Linda Ortega case. So, some of you may know about this. It was kind of talked about a lot. It happened back in 2012, in St. Joe, Arkansas, or just outside of St. Joe, Arkansas, in the wooded area. On the afternoon of September 22nd, Linda Ortega, 53, and her brother Eddie Huff set out for a hike in the local forested area. Eddie returned alone, claiming to have left Linda at a relative's house, which was quickly discounted. Search parties were sent out for the next 5 days. On the fifth day, she was found in a very random, already searched location deep in the woodland. She was found flustered and unnerved and unsure how she had gotten there. She claimed that her brother had suffered some kind of a head injury and that she had decided to go get help. She claimed that as she walked through the woods, she came upon other hikers who, try as she might, simply was not able to see her or hear her when she called out to them.
Oh.
She also witnessed bizarre shadow figures that appeared to watch and follow her from the trees and bushes. Well, that's interesting. They were talking about
Yeah.
shadow people. The next thing she knew, she was coming to in the forest with the search party calling her name. She had no idea that 5 days had passed. Her brother Eddie remained confused about the event, having seemingly no real memory of the incident, and remained confused and disoriented for several days. He was checked for a head injury, but nothing was ever found. And then I have a little note to myself because I did some more research on it. They also reported that when they found her, even though she'd been missing for 5 days, her clothes were completely clean and she was not dehydrated or malnourished in any way.
That's wild.
Yeah,
That
so
is
I'm
wild.
guessing it was some kind of a slip
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah. It sure
Yeah,
sounds like it.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah. That
one.
one's that's an interesting one, and it's really close to us. And in fact, I believe that lady was from Oklahoma somewhere. She was there visiting her brother.
Hmm.
So yeah, didn't
Goodness.
happen all that long ago. All right, what do we got next?
Okay, next is Sharon with book 1, page 10.
Okay, easy enough.
Talking about the Hatman dress up box. Ian said someone ends up with a silk scarf. That could be. That
Nice.
would suck. You see him sitting there all wrapped up looking like a washerwoman. Dang it.
This is on Elizabeth's grave in Chillicothe, Ohio, Mount Union Pleasant Valley Cemetery. I think this is from when we were researching different cemeteries and graves. So, the legend. In the late 1800s, a local woman named Elizabeth inherited a huge fortune at the time of the death of her husband, John. Mad and jealous that a mere woman should possess such wealth, several unnamed local men drug her to the cemetery where they hung her from a large oak tree towards the rear of the graveyard.
Oh,
She was later found and was buried towards the front of the cemetery. Since then, her headstone is rumored to move on its own, ending up often under the very tree that she was hung from. In another variation of the legend, Elizabeth was so overcome by grief that she hanged herself. Although many believe both stories exist because the men responsible for her murder were the very ones stating that she had done it herself, deflecting any accusations against them away. The cemetery has since been vandalized. However, within the destruction might be proof of the legend. While Elizabeth's gravestone seems to be missing, a pile of old headstones were uncovered under an old oak tree towards the rear of the cemetery, and among them was a stone that read, Elizabeth P. Eagleston, born November 16th, 1819, died June 5th, 1896, wife of John, who died 1894, which was 2 years before. The haunting was reported. Elizabeth is seen walking the graves at night in a white dress, sometimes seen hanging from the tree. There's lights, strange sounds. It's also been reported that two shadowy men dressed all in black are sometimes seen walking away from the cemetery. Um, and if you want to find it, I have a little note to myself down here. It's in Mount Union Pleasant Valley Cemetery, located on an unmarked road off of Union Lane, not far from Egypt Pike, outside Chillicothe, Ohio. So the cemetery is unused right now.
Enzo said Chillicothe, Ohio is kind of near the Great Serpent Mound, too. That's interesting.
Ooh, I'd love to go see that. That
I
would be
would too.
cool.
That'd be so neat.
Yeah.
I remember that from the podcast that we did on cemeteries and graves and things like that. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Cool.
Let me
All right.
back up here. That was Sharon's. So Tony is next with book 4, page 2.
Ooh, okay. I can do that.
Ian, when we were talking about not that story, but the one before, I can't even talk. Feign flusteredness when I bump into a person in the supermarket I don't wish to speak to. I just do
Um,
I'm looking over here now.
this is on the Poplick monster.
On the what?
The Poplick monster.
The Pope
You should know
Lick.
the
Popelick. Yeah.
Poplick monster, the goat man
Yes.
of the Trestle Bridge. I'm
Yeah.
sure some of you at home know this story, but I'm gonna tell it because it's crazy. This happens at Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky. He's part man, part goat, said to live under a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek. So there's quite a few legends that go with this on its origins and how it claims his victims. He's got several different ways he apparently kills and maims. So, one legend states that the creature is a reincarnated form of a local farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for power and money. Another states that it was an escaped circus oddity that survived a train accident, right there on the trestle. It's reported to use hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto the train trestle to meet their death with oncoming trains. It is said to jump from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing underneath of it. Also claims that it will attack victims with an axe, and that just the sight of the creature is enough to make people jump from the trestle. So, in 1988, a short film was put out called The Legend of the Pope Lick Monster, and I believe it's available on Facebook, or not Facebook, on YouTube, if you would like to go and watch that. I remember it got a little bit of guff when it came out because apparently there's a scene in it where a guy survives the Poplick monster. He's lured out onto the train tracks and then he jumps down and holds onto the edge of the trestle as the train goes by, and that's how he survives. And unfortunately, there was some kids that died not long after that was released because they decided to try it.
Yeah.
And didn't make it.
Did not survive that.
Yeah. I do have a listing of some of those deaths here. In 1988, right after the film came out, a kid named Jack Charles Baum II was hit and killed by a train. The guy he was with got hit but was just injured. In 1994, a man was killed when his ATV overturned and he was pinned to the top of the trestle and the train hit him. In 2000, a 19-year-old boy was killed when he jumped to miss the train. He went out and then jumped off of it trying to miss the train. In 2016, 26-year-old Raquel Bain was hit by a train. Her boyfriend survived actually from hanging from the edge, so he managed to pull it off. And in 2019, Savannah Bright, age 15, was crushed by the train. Her friend Kaylee Keeling was hurt but survived. So
Dang.
these kids go out there and mess around and find out.
So if you go, Chelsea, because Chelsea said one of my friends moved to Louisville a while back and I joked we needed to go hunt for them. Yeah, just be careful.
Yeah, Please be
Don't be
careful.
diving off the the tracks.
Yeah,
You're
don't do
smarter
that.
than that. I know you are. So won't be an issue. Ian is asking, is a Serpent Mound unique as a landscape figure in the US and are there others? There's a lot of different things in the United States that have been hidden, actually, that aren't really
Hmm.
talked about that much, aren't really, they're there, but they're not like hugely promoted.
Yeah.
And Enzo said that part of the country has a lot of mounds, but none are like the Great Serpent Mound. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Figures in the
So what do we?
landscape are quite, yeah, oh, for sure in the UK. Yeah. And you, it seems like it's more embraced in the UK than it is here. And that's really sad
Yeah.
because we have some neat stuff that just isn't really talked about. Okay, the next one is Enzo with book four, page 58. There's a lot of things that we need to do stories on. You know, there's not far from us in Oklahoma, maybe 3, 4 hours away, is Heavener, Oklahoma, and they have a runestone park there. And there's an actual runestone that's carved that's been known well
Yeah.
before white man was here. You know that it was there, and it's been. I want to say it's uh, the I can't remember if it's the greater or the lesser Futhar rune
Yeah.
carvings that are in it, and they can read them. They know what they say. Something about it's Gloam's Valley or something, and with a date on it. Of
Yeah.
and they're pretty sure that Vikings had passed through that area and had claimed that as Gloam's.
Yeah. We'll have to do a show on like the local, like the Nubis caves and the Hevner
Yes.
runes and all of that stuff. Um, Speaking of that, Pam and I were talking backstage. It won't be the next show, but I think the show after that we're going to include. You had discussed wanting to hear about, like the omens and the missing time that kept people from being at the Murray building explosion
The nine
and 9
11.
11. I think we're going to make that like a bad omen show. We're going to try to do here maybe after Randonautica. So,
That would be really cool.
one for
And
you.
he said too, one for the Nazca lines. That'd be a fun one to do.
Yeah, that would be a fun one.
Be interesting.
All right, Enzo's is on Chessman Park in Denver, Colorado, where my kid is right now.
Yep.
This is also part of the cemetery research that I was doing. Formerly Mount Prospect Cemetery, opened 1859, closed in the 1880s, and became an eyesore as it became disused. The city of Denver opted to move the bodies and turn it into a park. 5,000 bodies were due to be moved, but only around 700 were moved in just the first 2 years. To speed up progress, Denver officials hired undertaker E.P. McGovern. He was paid per coffin he moved. To make as much money as possible, he dismembered untold amounts of corpses and added various body parts to extra spare coffins.
Goodness.
McGovern was found out eventually and fired. Unable to undo McGovern's handiwork and unwilling to move forward on the original plans, the city opted to leave the remaining 3,000 bodies, remove all above ground traces of the burial sites, and build the park on top. Reports there, because it's haunted, are apparitions, strange noises, screams, shadow people, ghost children playing on park equipment, claims to be able to see outlines of burials still in the landscape. And you can, if you look at photos of the park, you can see the indents, just like you
Oh
see in a
man.
cemetery. Yep. So there you go. Chessman Park, Denver, Colorado. Go check it out.
Do they
They didn't move
Yeah.
the
Do they
bodies.
want the movie Poltergeist? That's how you get the movie Poltergeist.
That's true.
And Ian, Enzo pointed out that in the early settler days, a lot of mounds were just destroyed to make towns and such, and it doesn't get talked about much out of shame. That's true. There was so much looting done, just absolutely sickening.
Yeah. All right, I think yeah, Chelsea's is the same one, so page 11. This is
Yay.
on the North Texas airship flap in 1897. Now, interestingly enough, we're going to be giving a talk on the airship flap in the section that happened in Kansas from 1897 at Kansas UFO Day. Um, so this will kind of go right along. We'll probably make mention of a little bit this. There was when I say airship, I mean UFO, because back in the late 1800s, they didn't
What they
have the
call it.
term UFO or saucer or anything like that. That didn't come until after, like Project Sign and all of that, when the government started naming it, all this other stuff. So this one is there's two sightings on this page. Between April 13th and 17th, 1897, there were 38 reported sightings of airships in 23 counties in Texas. Descriptions varied somewhat, but there was a general consensus that they had cigar-shaped bodies or cabins, 50 to 60 feet long, with propellers at each end, large bat-like wings, and huge floodlights fore and aft. And I'm going to make mention of this. The fact that they had floodlights is extraordinary. It was the late 1800s. They didn't have battery-powered spotlights like we do now. Imagine what it took to create a huge spotlight in the air, right? Uh,
Oh,
Most witnesses saw neither pilot nor crew, but in some cases, not only did observers see people manning the ships, but talk to them. A Waxahachie newspaper reported an entire conversation had by Judge Love and an airship crew, which claimed to have flown there from the North Pole. Crazy stories. Um, Aurora, Texas UFO incident, April 17th, 1897. A UFO or airship was reported to have crashed into a windmill on the property of a judge, J.S. Proctor, at 6 a.m. Central Time. The pilot, who was deemed not of this world, did not survive the crash. It was buried with Christian rites at a nearby Aurora cemetery, which now contains a Texas Historical Commission marker mentioning the incident. Reportedly, wreckage from the crash site was dumped into a nearby well located under the broken windmill, while some was buried with the alien. Later, a Mr. Brawley Oates, who purchased Judge Proctor's property around 1935, developed an extremely severe case of arthritis after cleaning the debris from the well to put it back to use. Being sure it was caused from the contaminated water, he dumped the debris back in and sealed it off with a concrete cap marked with the year 1945. Later, many believed it to be a hoax and that the story was fabricated by the judge, who they claimed never even had a windmill. This was proven wrong later in the early 2000s when the UFO Hunters TV crew unearthed the remains of the workings of the windmill base. They also uncapped the well. They found no debris, but the water did test extraordinarily high in metal content. Research into previous property owners showed the well had been cleaned of debris. Requests to exhume the alien grave were turned down by the city. The TV crew did use ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors, finding anomalies and big spikes in metal content. When they came back a few years later, they turned up nothing during ground tests, noting that the ground seemed different. It's assumed that the area had been dug up by the city and all the evidence removed. So there's
still
that one.
fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Interesting, interesting.
Interesting. Do we have any more?
We do. I was
Okay.
just going to pop these up real quick. Sharon said Glomes
All right.
Valley, been there, very spiritual place. I want to go. I haven't ever got to go yet, but we were talking about maybe doing a road trip and going. Spiral Mounds are really close to that too, next to Heavener. So that'd be a fun trip. Next is, did you get Ian's?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
5, 6, 7, please.
All
That's
right,
awesome.
this is on crop circles. Let's see here. It's a listing. So on this one, we've got circles in 1990 Illinois, fall of 1990. UFO field investigators handled almost 70 reports, including 21 close encounters. So this was a flap in Illinois. 100 in California, the 192 formation. So it was 2 hours outside of San Francisco. A barley field that looked like a computer chip, found by photographer Julie Bellinger as she and her husband flew over in a helicopter. It It's a very detailed depiction of the number 192 written over and over in Braille. It's speculated it's 192 found an internet protocol referring to the nearby Silicon Valley, or something referring to do with its radioisotope or radium, which has 192 in its symbol. So there's a isotope which has 192 in its symbol. The interesting thing about this site is they thought that it was artist made, because there's a lot of the crop circles that are artist made, because it looked like a computer chip, like somebody come in because it was Silicon Valley, somebody paid to have it put in there probably as propaganda for their, their business or something like that. But the interesting thing about this one was that it had no footprints in or out, and it also had the iron ore balls found at the
That's
first
right.
layer of dirt.
That's interesting.
And it had the silica sheeting on the barley blades, which is something that happens when something is superheated with microwaves.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So
we did it.
there were some interesting artifacts left behind on that one for
Yes.
sure.
Yes, most
Cool.
definitely.
And Ian's right. He said crop circles, we're just about to come into the season. Yep. It's getting to be that time. Okay, the next one is Sylvain with book 3, page 33, please.
I'm pulling it up.
And let me double check. I think he might be the last one.
Okay. Well, that works out perfectly.
Yes, looks like it.
We're just about ready to be done. Okay. Okay. Oh, this will be good. This is remains of 3 skeletons found in cave, Columbia, Kentucky. So this would be from our Kentucky stuff.
Nice.
It says excerpts from the Louisville Courier Journal, January 30th, 1876. 2 brothers named White were wandering around the dense forest on the western end of Adair County when they ran into what they thought was a sinkhole or a fox den. Deciding to explore it, they soon realized that it was actually the entrance to a cave. It was soon large enough to walk through upright. They proceeded in about 150 yards when the cave opened into a large picturesque gallery rivaling Mammoth Cave. In the northeast corner, about 5 feet from the ground, they saw strange characters and hieroglyphics neatly carved into the wall, which upon closer examination proved to be the head rock of a vault. Inside, the brothers found 3 skeletons, which measured 8 feet 7.5 inches, 8 feet 5 inches, and 8 feet 4 3/4 inches in length. Their heads were all laid facing east. Beside them laid 3 huge swords, but were so decayed they crumbled to dust when touched. Unfortunately, on their way out, their torch went out, and they were forced to feel and follow the sound of a cave stream, finally making their way out some 3 days later. The entrance to the cave lost. So they didn't go back out the way they came in, and they never found it again.
That happens.
So, it does.
Quite often, it seems like. Enzo said, giants! Woohoo! Wonder if they're redheaded.
All right. So did we get through everybody?
We did. Enzo said, don't say crop circles. They make Lou Elizondo cry.
Oh, that's
darn
sad.
it. That is sad.
Oh my
Lizard peoples.
Lizard peoples. All right.
And Sylvain said, thanks for that. So, yay.
All right. So, do you have anything else to add about Hatman or?
I don't. I looked through everything that I wanted to touch on. I was able to touch on. So, yeah. So, he's an enigma for sure. That's an interesting one. And all we can conclude is we don't know.
We have no idea.
He's something. We just don't know what.
We know we don't want to see him.
There's exactly. We don't want to see him. And we're pretty sure he's something because there's way too many global reports. So what he is, we don't know what he is.
We don't know what he is.
My English has slipped. So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's let everybody get out of here. It's already after 9, so it's getting late. Um, yeah. Okay. So really quick, catch us for an all no show in 2 weeks, which will be the 21st. We're gonna
Yes.
do Randonautica. Download that app. Go try it and take some photos and let us know how it goes, or at least show up in the chats here in a couple weeks and let us know. Join in with us because we're
Take
gonna
some
be doing
photos and
experiments too.
send the photos to us so we can have them for the show, because that'll be really
Yeah,
cool. And your
yeah, that'd
story
be
if you
awesome.
have interesting findings,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Yep. Okay, so thank you everybody who hung out in the chats. Take a quick second if you haven't done it yet. If you came in later, give us the like and share or the thumbs up and hit that bell really quick. Thank you so much for that. Um, yeah. Thanks for sticking around for the notebook game. And of course, remember you can listen in wherever you get your podcasts. And our entire back catalog is free and ready for you to listen to. Don't listen to the first one, it was really bad.
I have not too long ago, and I was just like, oh God.
Woo, I dropped stuff.
I
But
swear
I
it's
just
just
got
gonna.
done listening to our Christmas show from this last, and it was really fun. So if you want like a
It
fun,
was
silly
good.
one, go back and listen to the Christmas show. It was good.
Yeah, it was a good
Yep.
one.
Anywho, I'm gonna get us all out of here. So keep it weird, keep it strange, and remember it's all connected. And stay
Yeah.
away from the Hat Man. Good night.
Good night, everybody.